This is Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Cepin. I'm pastor at the Village Church in Tucson. And across from me is Andy Littleton, who is pastor of Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona. And we have been doing this podcast for many years now.
Yeah. How many years?
3, I think.
Wow. It's
almost
wild.
3 years.
Wow.
I think it'll be 3 years in March. 3 or 4. I'll check. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. And this is our podcast where we used to get breakfast. Just reminder, since it's a new year.
Yes.
We used to get breakfast before we were on a radio show, or somebody from each of our churches, they were hosting a radio show together on culture, and they would have us on for what they called the Interfaith Roundtable, even though there was only one faith at the table. But they would let us pitch in on cultural events, so we would have a little discussion beforehand, and we realized we tended to have way more ability to work out a thought at the breakfast.
Yes.
So after the radio show ended, we said, man, we should keep doing the breakfast. And then we thought, let's record the breakfast. We used to eat. That was kind of gross. So now we have breakfast before.
And we have Nespresso coffee.
We do. We had some coffee.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it. This is it's unscripted. This is us working things out as pastors. And so you just get to sit at the table with us and walk along with us in this. It's not our perfect thoughts, but it's how we process as friends and pastors. So thanks for joining us, and enjoy this conversation on what happened at the Capitol, but way more than that.
Yeah.
Way more about our churches and priorities and what the gospel demands.
Yeah.
Really. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Andy.
Hold on. I feel like I'm quiet. Check. That's better. That's just me. All right.
Check. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, man. Hey, it's been a bit, and you have taken the time off that you take off, your fallow month.
I've certainly taken it for Faith Over Breakfast.
Oh, you didn't take it for any. Okay.
I mean, I did get 2
So
weeks.
when you declared the fallow month from the Village, you meant just
Faith Over Breakfast
from me.
Well, this year, people are kind of saying, "Well, hasn't this year been sort of fallow?" I'm like, "No," but
No.
in some ways, in some ways, it has.
Okay, let's just dig into that for a second. As a pastor, I feel like I have never had such an active, like where my mind was processing, how do I deal with this, and then this, and then this, and then this. But I've heard from people who feel it was a very relaxing time. They've said, "Oh, I think I really needed 2020. I'm rejuvenated," or they've been bored or feeling
right.
they didn't have anything to do. I'm going to go on a limb and say for all pastors I know, that was not 2020.
No.
Yeah.
In my experience, even talking to people who have the 2020 relaxation or whatever, it's sort of paradoxical because on one hand, they're like, wow, yeah, this is really good. Had more time with my family, felt more connected. Yeah. And then also, it was terrible. Everything was bad.
Yeah. I feel like late March, early April, I tasted of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. I was thinking back, wow, like I remember March, April, the weather was beautiful.
Yeah.
We were sitting out in the evening.
Bike rides with my family. That was
having
great. Yeah.
picnics outside, barbecuing, enjoying walks with the kids.
Hand sanitizing like crazy,
Yep.
but all those things were there.
Then mid-July, I'm like, oh gosh.
Here we are. Now it's just crazy.
Spike is happening. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So 2021, Faith Over Breakfast, we actually had a production meeting and had notes. And then you sent me those notes, and I don't know how to
can't find them.
But I have them in my own notebook.
So the main agenda for Faith Over Breakfast production is that Eric learns how to use technology.
Yeah, there's some technological deficiencies that I have.
You were, Eric, this signals something. You were the technology pastor at one point, and you're beginning to be the guy that's not up on the current stuff anymore. I'm not either, really, honestly. But have you accepted this? Have you? Can you acknowledge this?
Yeah, in fact.
Okay.
I took Facebook off my phone this weekend.
Oh, Facebook, is that one? Is that one
I've never? One.
Is that a new one? Is that like Parler?
It's between Parler and Facebook. It's called Facebook.
Facebook.
I took Facebook off, and I had the happiest Monday ever.
Yeah, good.
And I'm done, other than to like post some village stuff.
Yeah,
that's kind of stuff we have to do.
Isn't that all you've been doing ever? Or you didn't post a lot, but you must have cruised a lot.
I do a lot of cruising, and I do post, but mostly I post on other comments on other people's.
You're a commenter.
Yeah, I comment. I don't.
Your presence was in the feeds of others.
Yes.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good, man. I'm an occasional scroller, occasional poster, occasional commenter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you.
Do you?
Yeah.
Good. I feel hurt.
I'm excited to be back with you. I feel like sometimes you and I like have, it gets, I don't mean to say this in a bad way, but maybe it'll sound like it gets old after. I mean, you and I have been doing this for like how long?
I am sick of this.
Okay. Well, let's just work on that a little bit.
All right. So we need to talk. No, I'm not. I've missed you too, Eric.
There's like we've, you
get in a rut.
Yeah, we've had so many conversations, hundreds. We can say you and I have talked about things over 100 times. There's over 100 hours of you and me talking.
That's right. Speaking of which, as I used to do, I'm going to say we need to jump into this. We need to give the people what they want here.
Let's give the people what they want.
Yeah. So I didn't know what we were talking about because we had this production meeting and talked about things we were going to talk about. We're going to start taking a week off every month to strategize.
Yes.
And so you'll
see
see
notes
2
on
to
your
3.
Phone?
Yeah.
That'd be helpful if you did.
You'll see 2 to 3 podcasts from us a month, which is about what we've always done. But we loaded up several topics that are going to come. I think there's some good stuff. Let's see. 30, 40 a year from us. You're going to get current events the first week of the month, which is not now, even though that is what we're going to do today.
So we're already podcast of the month.
Already breaking the plan. And then we're going to monthly talk about something personal, to us, life of a pastor, what it's like. And we expect the ratings of those to be astronomical.
Because that's what I get from so many people who listen to Faith Over Breakfast is like, what really goes on?
Just tell me more about you. Yeah, totally.
Actually, I think that's true.
We're going to do that to give the interwebs a break. We just want it to slow down for a little bit.
Slow down the traffic,
so you can do something else. Right.
Right.
And then we're going to have a church-related but relevant to our people discussion. Yeah. Something about the church, about the faith. Kind of mix it up, kind of have some variety, dependable variety, if you will. So there's some topics, and then in this note, I'm not going to share is a password that you might want to consider remembering.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's where we're headed. So today, hey, I'm just gonna launch my favorite piece of news this morning.
Okay.
About the Capitol, whatever you want to call it, riot, mob, insurrection, was that the Arizona guy, Jake Angeli, and Angeli is not his real last name, it's like just starts with a C. He who, Sarah Palin and others said was the Antifa guy, who turns out is not an Antifa guy for sure, because they asked him, why were you at the Capitol? And he's a known QAnon guy. He's a known Trump supporter. And he said, I was there because President Trump told real patriots to go. So I went. So he turned himself in. He's been arrested. Today is his first appearance in court. We'll see what comes back at him. But my favorite piece about him, and it made me laugh out loud in my truck with joy, was that his mom reported that he is not able to eat in the prison because he can only eat organic. This is the bullhorn guy with the spear.
Oh, I didn't know that guy was the Arizona guy.
He's the Arizona guy. He's from Phoenix. Wow. He's a known dude. He's been at all the Trump rallies. storm the Capitol, going to take back our country. But one hiccup, he's currently low on energy because he can only eat organic.
Wow.
So that
I want to
that little piece, that was a surprise piece of news to me, and I didn't see it coming, and I just laughed, like thinking of this powerful shirtless man who's like, these aren't organic peas. I can't eat that.
Oh, poor guy.
So let that launch us into a discussion about what happened.
What's happening in our world.
And happening. Because there's this week, there's news of a lot more potential organized revolts.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. Where were you? I think that it's like a September 11th sort of thing. People are going to remember where they were when they saw. Where were you when you heard this was happening?
Because I threw my back out.
Oh yeah.
I was sitting on the couch, making phone calls and watching this unfold in front of me.
Yeah. So you were watching it live.
Yeah.
Mike and John and Nick and I were at the church because we were doing some little projects. We were putting together some outdoor heaters for the kind of back patio area. And we decided to put this stuff on TV, the election certification. We just thought this could be interesting. This could be kind of a historic moment in how this is dealt with. So we put it on the projector. And so we were sort of paying attention to it, sort of distracted when this all broke out. And then we were spreading some gravel, and we put the Bluetooth speakers on so we could stay tuned in with what was going on. So, well, whoa. There's so much has been said. This is so you caught me by surprise with this topic because it just feels like everybody's talking about it all the time. Where do you want to go with this?
Well, and maybe we can, just make it short and then talk about other things. But mostly, I just wanted to acknowledge. I think it would be silly if we talk about faith over breakfast and it's two pastors talking that it wouldn't be talked about at some level,
right? Sure.
And
acknowledging this is a huge piece of our collective life.
And I think the first thing I would say is, wow, that was crazy.
That was crazy.
It was.
They're investigating 2 pipe bombs still.
Yeah, there's still a lot going on.
Yeah. Turns out Capitol Police were involved. That's a new development.
Yeah, it's a strange moment. Mm-hmm. I actually think what's more important than that is that the possible impeachment of our president and what kind of impact that would have on our country, and how we feel about the rule of law versus political expediency and national health, like emotional and spiritual, and just
whose national health, right?
Yeah, right, yeah, and what that might do to our country.
Yeah.
So those are things that are interesting to me.
Yeah.
In all of this, I think that we can't forget history. So, not long ago, the Senate buildings were occupied. Not long before that, the doors of the Supreme Court were almost busted down. And
sure,
right. These are. It is an unusual event in that some things happen that have never happened before, but it's not unusual in that different buildings that are important have been invaded or almost invaded.
Sure.
And so we can't forget history.
That's true. That's true. But at the same time, when has it been after an event in which the president, his son, and his lawyer all highly alluded that this was what they wanted to happen? You could say they meant to or not.
Right.
I don't care. But the people are now confessing they thought that's what they wanted them to do.
Right.
And then this has been one of the ones that's just in the back of my mind, the characters involved. We've got all the way from elected officials to military, ex-military folks in their full tactical gear, to dudes like Bullhorn Guy it was like there was almost a comic.
There's some absurdity to
it. Like in the past, the wars and the occupations. This is like a new breed. This is a whole. It's, and I think other countries. I mean, I can't think of one violent act that I've seen on the news that looked this crazy.
Comical at least?
Comical. Yeah. I'm saying, like, and I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not anything. It just was like because we were on the audio version of it when they were first breaking in, so I didn't see that at first. But when I started to see the images, this is wild. Have you seen any world event look like this ever?
No.
I haven't either. It's normally like coordinated warfare or coordinated political disobedience, or this, which they're investigating if that's what this was, but this looked wild.
Yeah, and the protesters, when they got in, didn't seem completely to know what they were doing.
They were definitely not on the same page. Well, were some of them on the same page?
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and bet some of them were on the same page. But yeah, there were definitely, one of the young guys that turned himself in said, he said, I got caught up in the moment. He did have a bunch of Facebook posts that said he was, or social media posts said he was going into the Cap. So did he get caught up? I don't know. But it seems like perhaps a bit of a mob mentality took over.
Yeah, and some groupthink happened.
Sure, which is possible for any of us. Yeah.
I think for me, I will just say from a personal perspective, I was like, wow, this is weird. And also, I'm fatigued.
Yeah.
By all of this, like mentally fatigued, to the point where even as a follower of Jesus and the pastor, I'm like, well, like I'm in Arizona, and I really don't know how I really want to think about this. I just kind of want to focus on what's in front of me because I can't do anything else. Like I don't want to be in a dialogue about it, other than I want to say, okay, well, what is God calling me to? Like, how am I loving my neighbor? Because I don't know how to. This is weird and unexpected, and it seems like the anvil is going to come down on it real fast. And it seems to have come down on it really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, the chatter and the way it's seeming to maybe activate more folks is interesting. And people that are surprising to me. I'm looking at level-headed people who throughout my life viewed as like very intelligent, level-headed people who never would, in my mind, would have been pro something like this, defending this, which is confusing. I think that's confusing to the watching world. I think the Christian church is presenting itself in this as utterly discombobulated and not on the same page.
Right.
Anyway, and that's been happening, but
sure.
And I'm seeing that. I agree with you. There's part of me that's like, that's DC, this is Arizona. This has been an insane year. What does this have to do with me? And then I start seeing people I know and love who live down the street. And I'm going, oh, you're into this.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about it, right?
No, I'm not saying you don't talk about it. I just am like, wow, there is a fatigue for me in all of this. And having
all of us.
And having, a voice in all of it. I mean, and also having just to articulate a biblical response, to articulate, is like, okay.
So in your community, do you sense a tension over this, or is it just everybody's on the same page? Like, I mean, would you speaking up about this really make a difference? Because would you speak up and they all just go, yeah, totally, we agree with you. We condemn the actions, and everybody goes, yeah.
Yeah, I could say that, and everyone would be like, yeah, those are actions to be condemned. I think the majority of our community is, even those who find themselves on the right, are kind of also fatigued by this. Like, it's gone too far, and it's not in their world. I think the hard part is there. I think I can quote one of the people in our church who said, who's very active in the work, is a very active person in the work in the community when it comes to abortion and those things, and pro-life. Mm-hmm. He said, well, now I'm going to have to work twice as hard. Before there was this crazy guy, but it was a lot easier to be working in the pro-life world. Now, Kamala Harris has said that all state legislation that has anything to do with abortion will come across her desk first. And she's going to fight it to the best of her ability. And he's like, so now I'm going to have to work twice as hard.
Yeah.
To do what I do. And so I understand, this view of the Democratic Party as an enemy, if you believe in pro-life, in the sense of, it's a single fight for you. You see that. And I think that fuels some of the Christian movement within my church. I would say everyone in my church who finds themselves at any level connected to Trump is got a moral thing that they're wrestling with when it comes to abortion. That's, I think if Biden had come out and said, I'm pro-life and I will continue the actions of Donald Trump when it comes to supporting life, he would have not only won, he would have won in a landslide.
Sure.
I don't even think Donald Trump would have gotten maybe 2 or 3 states.
Yep.
But, and so I think that's a big deal in my community. And I think, I think
that's there in ours too, but I feel like it goes even further than that into I think some of the things that we have said that have made people struggle the most are like statements like the American experience, life, and history are not integral to the gospel message and should not be viewed as one thing.
Right.
I think that has disturbed. To me, that's just obvious. And it feels like I do think we have people who are worried about the abortion thing. It matters to me too. I'm not pro-abortion, never have been.
Right.
And so I see that as an issue. I think the church should be crystal clear on it. I think a biblical moral framework is absolutely clear. I think how that, whether your president holds that or not is one issue to consider among many.
Right.
But that said, it feels like the hangups go deeper than that. That's the easy one. That's the one that's just like, I can point at that and that one's crystal clear. But then people have talked about there needs to be a consistent pro-life ethic and so on. I mean, it seems like some of this other stuff starts to betray that there's more to it when a Capitol police officer lays dead and we're not shocked and horrified. Why? Right. It seems there's more to it. There's a bigger goal. There's something else under this. That's just how it feels to me, at least in our world. I think our church has more diversity of political thought than many, which has made it complicated because you want to honor that and celebrate that, but also speak with clarity about things.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think that, we're inheritors of the moral majority. Like our culture has grown up in that. So the people who show up in your church are children of the
Absolutely.
the parents have done that.
Absolutely.
Either they are new Christians or they grew up in church in that context. It's
and there's there. and they don't know that this is part of a movement that's somewhat extra biblical.
Yeah.
They just view it as this is just Christianity.
Right.
As if like the scriptures make every angle that the moral majority in America took, that they're just inextricably tied. And they're not.
Right.
Not always. Yeah.
Well, and I think that the hard part is, I think what we're doing as a church, and I think this is what sets aside like the Village and Mission Church, is that though we're saying, look, we love our brothers and sisters, but part of the reason we planted these churches is that there is we need to get, I don't want to say get back to, we need to articulate the gospel as something that is separate from state and is not intermarried with it, and is actually a whole different way of living and a different kingdom.
And it's right that, and I could beat this drum over and over again, but I'll beat it one more time just in case anybody's mishearing me on this. I am not talking about a Democrat liberal agenda, nor a conservative Republican agenda.
Right.
I want Christians to live like Christians.
Right.
No matter what. Yeah.
Right. Which for me, and a lot of times when I say that I want a gospel-centered, kingdom-oriented church, what I'm usually, I mean, there's a lot built into that.
There's a lot.
But one of the things I'm saying that people don't tend to hear is that I want people to wrestle with what Jesus is saying about behavior. I mean, grace and all those things are good, but when I'm talking to Christians, not non-Christians, I'm talking about Christians, I want them to wrestle with what's going on in the Beatitudes, what's happening in Paul's conversation about the way we involve ourselves in the world, in Romans and in Thessalonians in particular, and how we understand authority, how we understand our own behavior, Peter and the way he talks about conducting ourselves. Like, these are things that go against many of the ways I see churches act and the words that they say and how they understand themselves. And so I feel like instead of saying, hey, this is the way we should all be, I think kingdom-oriented churches say, well, here's a scripture, let's wrestle with it. Let's figure out what God's actually saying. Let's do the hard work instead of just saying, okay, this is the way it is, and I'm going to attach myself to this part of the state, and they're the power, and they're going to do what I want them to do, and so that's where we're at.
I would add to that I'm increasingly committed to asking the question, not only are we gospel-centered, but, every epistle of Paul starts off with some kind of, he addresses these people in their particular deal, usually articulates the gospel somehow. And then the big question that takes up usually a good solid chunk of it is, how does this belief in the gospel now address the problem you're having or shape our lives and make them unique? And so there is never an articulation of the gospel that doesn't bear out in our the way that we live, the way that we feel, the way that we worship, the way that we conduct ourselves with one another, in our families, in our society. There always are implications for life.
Right.
And so, anyway, I'm wanting to make sure that I feel like in some of the gospel-centered movement, it's been all doctrinal gospel-centeredness and not practical living out of that gospel. And I feel like that needs to happen. And I want to interpret events like, for instance, let's just take a hypothetical. Somebody is like, I am so angry at all the people on Facebook, I'm going to Parler now. I'm never talking to you again. Right. Okay, that's an action you're going to take. Is that action shaped by the gospel?
Right.
Ask that question. Grapple with that.
Right.
If it tells you need to get completely off of all the social media, then do that. But whatever you do in these actions, ask that question. Is this coming out of the paradigm given to us by Christ in the gospel or not? I think it's a great question. I think it's the question that the disciples present, and that we learn from watching Christ with his disciples, and that Paul anyway.
No, I think to just piggyback off what you're saying, and I think this is the important part, is that people tend to talk about the thing you're supposed to do. So, for instance, just a non-political thing. If you say, oh, well, you should be reading your Bible.
Right.
Well, what system are you going to use?
Right.
Are you going to read 3 a year? Are you going to do an inductive study? So we need a procedure.
Right.
How am I going to do this? No one ever says, well, how do I read the Bible in the context of other people and relationship with them? Well, I don't know. What are you talking about? Like we always go to the safe thing and not, well, what does it mean to be in relationship? What you go look at everything you're talking about with Paul. Rarely does he say this has nothing to do with other people. It
always has to do with other people.
It's always about other people
and God.
In God, right?
Yeah.
These are this relationship that's happening between you and God and the people, But I think sometimes we're like, oh, no, there's this set of moral standards, and we're just going to like make sure we fit into those,
or we're going to proclaim them and be able to articulate them.
Yes,
yeah.
But I'm not thinking, well, what does it actually mean for me to be patient with people who don't believe what I believe? How do I have compassion and mercy on the guy who's spitting vengeance at me?
Right.
And yet when I look at the gospel, I think, oh, wait a minute, Jesus is sitting on the cross. People are spitting on him.
Right.
What does he say? He says, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Wait, what?
So how, yeah. And that's, and that is extremely challenging to me, what you're saying right there, even to my own state of mind lately, right? Which is good because that's a gospel-shaped challenge. And that's what I want us to be grappling with. Like, is that I read in the book Dane Ortland's Gentle and Lowly today. He made this little statement. I'm sure he wrote this. The book's newer, but I'm sure he wrote these words like a year or two ago. But he said, in Christ, we have someone who would have been unfollowed and maligned by everyone today, but he wouldn't have unfollowed anyone back. And he would have offered himself to all of us. And that challenged me to think, relationally, am I shaped by Christ, right? Am I shaped by Jesus? Am I shaped by the gospel? Because that's exactly, we should feel that, as Christians, we should feel that impulse and that weight because of the gospel and be shaped by that. Not just, I know more than these idiots, right? Or whatever it is.
And I think, I'm going to keep saying think, when you say shaped by the gospel, in many ways what you're saying is the death of Christ, the resurrection of Christ, and the ascension of Christ. I mean, with those 3 key things, but them in a relational sense, the righteousness that comes from that,
there's so many layers,
so transforming.
Yeah.
Like the closer I am to that, the easier it is for me to begin to offer these things that Paul challenges me to put on. And
I would just add to that, I may not say the easier, but I would say the more necessary the overflow. I don't think for Jesus was it easy to be rejected. Was it easy? But it was maybe natural or necessary or anyway. I don't want to give the perception that if you're shaped by the gospel, this becomes simple.
No, but I would argue that the less I try to do things on my own strength, the easier it actually becomes.
No, could there be a layer? Would it come more naturally? Yeah, I think so. But it still could be very painful unto death.
Oh,
even.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. There's the softness of, Jesus had a softness in his heart.
That's what this whole book I'm reading is about, by the way. Gentle and Lowly. It's the softness of his heart.
The actions are not necessarily easier. Just the heart is not in the way.
The inclination of the heart is toward doing these things.
Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it. I didn't necessarily disagree with you. I just wanted to nuance that out.
No, I think it's important. I think what happens to me personally is the further I get away from Jesus, the angrier I get at you.
Yes.
Because you're in my way.
Yes.
And you say things I don't like, and you do whatever.
Yes.
Because it becomes my narrative. It's about me. Instead of about Jesus. And I think it's a big part of what I see in these riots. And even though Jesus is up on the flags, Jesus is in the cross there that they had.
It's
his
name is there. Right?
Yeah, but it's not about him.
No, it isn't.
Because that's not what he would do. I mean,
one of my favorite, or not favorite, but there was a truck, and I have a picture of it, had two big flags. One said, F your feelings, and the other said, Jesus is my savior, Trump is my president.
Wow.
And here in Tucson, and I was like, there it is. There is incongruence happening here.
Yeah.
These are not possible. Yeah.
I think
Jesus, our Savior, never says F your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly would confess that in the midst of all this, in the midst of what happened in the Capitol, in the midst of the Black Lives Matters and just all the protests that have happened over racial inequalities, honestly, my heart is troubled it's troubled for our country, but it's also troubled in my own, just like, wow, I don't even know how I believe I should be as a citizen in this country.
Sure.
I'm not quite, I haven't come down to what I think God's called me to.
Yeah.
And that's troubling because it feels like it's happening very quickly with the virus also on top of all of it, as sort of the frosting on the disruption that's
or the magnifying glass.
The magnifying glass of it. And just the pain, like when I just listen to the pain of people in our world, and even in our leadership meeting, as Jessica was talking about spaces to learn and the stories of kids, and the pain, the present pain that has nothing to do with DC, nothing to do with the streets, just with that moment to moment, like need, and you have no way to meet it, and then listening to one of the guys, my housemate, talk about some of the stuff in his work and just some anger he was having at just the way people get treated, and it's just so despicable, and you're just like, well, what am I supposed to do with all this? That story, reminds me so much more of Jesus. Like, there's so much politically going on around Jesus that you don't hear about.
Right.
You also don't hear about Jesus taking a week off. I was telling my wife on Monday, I'm like, what if there was just one chapter in the Gospels where it's like, Jesus had a good time and he went fishing and caught a couple fish, and then he played a board game and sang around the fire, and it was just nice. Like, he doesn't have any of those
I know
moments. We don't get any of that, but it's, but Jesus was in the midst of people's messy, immediate life. And I do feel a strong pull, but there's also this large social messiness that we're in. That's part of each individual's messy life.
Well, it's a part of our narrative. We see it, we feel it. It's our nation. It's our, we are connected to these things.
Yeah.
We're not as Christians, we're part of a different kingdom, but we're also part of this one, and it affects us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you can feel the tension of it. Right? You can feel it.
It's really heavy.
Yeah. You walk into the room with somebody who, you and they have an ideological difference. You can feel it.
Right.
You don't have to say a word.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah, and my longing is that we could put those aside and make them secondary to what Jesus is calling us to, and loving one another and loving our neighbor.
Me too, but the trouble is that, you want to make it secondary, but when those things are shaping you, so this is to go like maybe the direction of like a James K.A. Smith or whatever, you are what you love, that the liturgies or the habits, the things that we listen to, the things that we're shaped by, the culture we live in, the ways that we worship, the edifices we enter into to worship, whether they're government buildings or malls or stadiums or whatever, shape us, and then we behave and we walk out of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it. I believe that is how it works. We are shaped. We are always worshiping. And so when we live out of those other things, to just say, let's make it secondary, or on the really negative side, let's just not talk about it.
Right.
That's like saying, let's not talk about our idols so we can just talk about Jesus and have both.
Right. I would.
I mean, I
would agree, and I think probably what we would probably say in COVID is that the power, particularly of our churches, and I think it's true for other churches, but where we put so much emphasis on our liturgies, they're new liturgies, they're ones that we've created as community, but they are liturgies. They define and reset us, and they're purposeful. They're not just like, hey, we just do these. No, they have a reason and a purpose, and we want them to be repeated and thought about and massaged into our life. That changes and combats the other liturgies.
Right.
And changes our behaviors. And I think, or influences them anyway. So I think that's something that's happened in our culture at the moment that's difficult, is that we don't have that. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to figure out how to form new ones while we look forward to maybe a different moment in time when we can come together. But yeah, I don't think I was saying I want them to be secondary, but man, when Jesus is primary, like in the invitation to let go and hold those things,
hold them loosely,
and to realize that they can become a place of idolatry. Like, I think coming together and saying, yes, I know that all of my other things have the potential to be idolatry or are idolatry.
And that's where the definitions of idolatry, like good things, masquerading as ultimate things or whatever, is helpful, because should you care about your country? Absolutely. 100%. Should you care who gets elected? Absolutely. Should you care about, race and the race discussion in our nation, how that's worked out? Yeah, absolutely. Should you care about your finances? Oh yeah, you better, or you're going to be foolish, right? And so all these things do have a play, and that's what's so confusing about them, is it's difficult to see when they've crept in and gone too far, and when they've eclipsed walking with Jesus. And I think that's the struggle of the church, is to be able to actually engage with that and make them, put them in their place and say, hey, for us, this matters, but it isn't ultimate. Right.
And I think, and probably we should end soon here.
Sure.
but I do want to say that, like, I think the thing I wrestle with is, as I look at my people, as I look at the church, the question that I've come to, and I came to this as a teenager, was, are we really taking this seriously? Like, all of a sudden, we have the God of the universe who comes down, dies on the cross for our sins, raised from the dead, and gives us this commission and this mission to live together and to bring others into this space, to invite them in. This seems kind of ultimate. Like, this seems to be, like, if the person who created you has dominion over you, delivers you, everything else should be underneath that. Like, we shouldn't be trying to create some utopia somewhere. We should be urgently trying to shape ourselves into the way of Jesus and invite others into that way. That doesn't seem to be the urgency is not there. Right. There's more of an urgency to get it right, to have to be politically expedient, to do all these other things. There's an urgency, it seems to me, to have the right opinion.
Within church, the urgency I tend to feel is that it would be nice for me. Like, that's one I've felt my whole life. People want church to be nice for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like when I go to church, when I meet with Christians, I should be disrupted.
This should be a formative time.
Yes.
Which is not to say, my favorite, me affirming moment of the week, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And even when I'm having fun which is part of community and part of following Jesus, having fun with people who love Jesus together, even those moments need to be formative in the way that I engage and how they treat me, how I treat them, it has to be, like, we have to be intentional. And it's, I keep saying this, I was challenged by Mark's sermon on Sunday on the breastplate of righteousness, but he read Ephesians 4, which talks about, the way we spend our time because of the days are evil. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else mentioned that and I've just been processing this, like, people, Eric, the days are evil. Like, how am I using my time? Like, what am I doing when I'm interacting with you and I'm interacting with people in my community and my neighbors? Like, is there an urgency to this because the days are evil, or am I like, yeah, well,
right?
What makes this pleasant? How can Andy and I have a pleasant time around the mic, and how can we have I want this to be fun. Let's, and those aren't bad longings, but they certainly shouldn't be my goals in this whole process.
Right? No, they're not goals God has given us. When you taste of it, it's a taste of the kingdom to come.
Right.
Wonderful. Enjoy it. Yeah. Right? Doesn't mean, go whip yourself.
No.
But it also, that isn't the life we're in right now. Yeah. That's not the primary thing going on.
Yeah, it's a race, and I need to remove encumbrances.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, hey, let's call it on that note and
first podcast of Faith Over Breakfast
2021. Well, thanks for joining us, Eric. Good to see you again, man.
It's really
I
good
think
to see you.
A lot of people probably don't realize this is just kind of when we hang out for the week. So
this is our hangout.
This is it. So it's been good, and I'm off to the next thing, and so are you. So good to see you, man. See you next week.